The secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Bean,
Present?
Mrs. Gordon. Here. Mrs. McCray. Dr. Leatherwood,
Here.
Mr. Johnson. Here. Mrs. Hutchinson.
Present.
Okay, we have a quorum. The next on the agenda is communications, announcements, and schedules.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have been involved for the past 2 weeks with our open houses, but we have 2 remaining, and I would like to invite you, if you would like to join me. But September 21st at 6:30 is the Arcadia Open House. September 26th is the last open house for the school year, the Illinois. On October 6th, this building transforms into a place that houses educators and people that are dedicated to the lives of children because in every classroom, rather than our young adults, will be teachers because we'll be using for the building on October 6th for our Institute Day. October 9th, Columbus Day, we're closed, and October 17th, we meet again at 6:30 p.m. here in our district office.
Thank you, Madam Superintendent. I apologize, I got a little bit ahead of myself. The next item on the agenda is a public
Probably should close.
I will close this meeting and make a motion to close this meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
So I'm moved and seconded to close this meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Then I will announce a public hearing on the proposed 2023-2024 budget and receive public comments on the proposed budget. Are there any comments from the public with respect to the budget? Craig, you want to make a presentation? I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. We talked last month about the tentative 23-24 school district budget, and it has been on display for actually over 30 days now on the district's website. And publication of tonight's public hearing was made as well in the newspaper and on the website. Mr. Likes is bringing up the presentation now. I'll just go briefly through the budget again, just to refresh your memory in terms of things we discussed last month. So looking overall, if you look at just the operational funds, which is really the important part the district is really graded on when it comes to the State Board of Education's financial profile scores, we show about a $333,000 surplus for the operating funds for 23-24, which would project to be a financial profile score of financial recognition. School districts get one of 4 financial profile scores at the end of each year. Financial recognition is the highest, and we would expect that District 162 once again would be the recipient of that award, barring any sort of unforeseen circumstances for the upcoming year. This is just, again, a recap of what those funds look like. The 4 operating funds are education, operations and maintenance, transportation, and working cash. And when you combine all those, you see the revenues over expenditures there that's projected of $333,000. So there are 4 additional funds we call non-operating funds. These are dedicated for very specific purposes: debt service for the payment of the school district's bonds, IMRF Social Security for pension funding, site and construction, obviously for construction purposes on the buildings, and the tort fund, which actually is not a fund that the district currently utilizes anymore, but there's a small amount of revenue that does run through there. So again, in total operating funds, a surplus of $333. When you look at all funds, it shows you a deficit there of about $4.5 million. Don't let that scare you. That's really just construction funds or construction costs in 23-24 that were really funded from money from the prior year. Again, looking at how the district funds its operations, the majority of that money coming from property taxes. And you see that pie from the state of Illinois is actually getting bigger every year. A lot of that has to do with those property tax relief grants that have been coming in for the past several years. Looking at expenditures, not unlike most school districts, the vast majority of expenditures are for salaries and benefits, of course. That is by far the largest expenditure, and the second highest grouping of expenditures is for purchase services. The majority of this really is for transportation, which is outsourced, and food service, of course, which is also outsourced. Operating revenue overall, we're projecting about a $2.7 million increase or 5.8% overall from last year's projected actual. About $1 million of that coming from property taxes. It's not necessarily an increase in property taxes, but it has to do with timing of receipts, new property, and some recapture taxes. Replacement taxes we're expecting to go down. That's something that's really dictated by the state of Illinois, not by the local school district. That comes from the state funds. And other local funds, about an $88,000 increase. Looking at state funding, about a $3.5 million increase there. Most of that coming from evidence-based funding. There's not an overall increase of $3.9 million in evidence-based funding, but in the operating funds there is. Last year we had some of those funds being used for construction purposes. We're actually projecting about a $1.9 million increase in state funding for evidence-based funding. A decrease because of the 21st Century Grant that's ending. And then on the federal side, we have several grants that are being closed out this year. Looking at expenditures, about a $3 million increase, 6.4%. Again, a lot of that having to do with salaries. We did have 2 new union contracts being implemented this year. So we have contractual increases associated with that. In the budget, we're budgeting as though all of the open positions that we had last year are being filled. And so you see some of the increases based on that. Benefits, about 11.5% increase, 6% of that coming from increase in health insurance rates. And then we do budget pretty conservatively for health insurance because we just don't know what plans everyone's signing up for. A couple other things to note. Obviously, the largest increase we had this year in terms of a single line item is student transportation. And we did have a science textbook adoption for this year. On the going down, of course, I mentioned the federal grants and some of those that are winding down. And we will be seeing savings this year in waste disposal because of the new bid the board approved last spring. A couple of items to note, we'll have the remainder of the Huth renovations in this budget because this budget did start back in July 1st. The remainder of the commissary kitchen, and then we are planning some media center renovations and furnishings, and we also have a contingency in there of $400,000 just to account for anything that is unforeseen at the time of the budget. Is there any questions? I'd be happy to take any.
Just one.
Yes.
The media center renovations, is that for the entire district or is that for just one particular location?
No, last year, I believe Madison had some renovations, and this year we're looking at Arcadia in Indiana.
Do we face a funding cliff at all with the ending of the ESSER funds?
No, so a great question. So later on the agenda, you'll see the approval of the updated ESSER spending plan. And what you'll see when you look at that is we're down to, at this point, funding out of ESSER for the cadre substitute teachers. And then a lot of the funding is going to construction for the bathrooms at Huth, which is being finished or was finished up this past summer. So we're not anticipating any sort of a fiscal cliff kind of situation with the ESSER funds.
Are
Mr.
there
President.
any further questions from members of the board? Are there members of the public audience that would like to make a comment or raise a question with respect to the proposed budget? I'd like to publicly thank you, Craig, for the award that we've received. It's your hard work and due diligence that is responsible for that. And I want, on behalf of the board, say how much we appreciate you and receiving the award. Thank you.
Mr. Bean, if I could, Mr. England proposed a unique way of distributing the allotment for supplies to our teachers. As you know, historically, they've gotten $75 a person. This year, they received $100 a person, but this was done through the payroll distribution system. But I would like, if you would, that's a small amount of money as compared to, the money that we have allotted for supplies. Would you comment on the way that looks? Because nothing is more important than our classrooms, and teachers need supplies. And so if you could, please.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Davis. An important point. So, what teachers see in the past, teachers have been allowed to be reimbursed for out-of-pocket costs up to a certain amount of money. And this year, of course, is $100, as Dr. Davis mentioned. But within the budget, as you go through those line items, you will see each building has, in addition to that, significant amounts of additional discretionary funds for classroom supplies, for instructional supplies, for media center, for instructional equipment, for the principal's office, and a couple of other items. So what we did is, what we generally do is we take a look at the projected enrollment for each building. We apply $100 for each student that we project to be in the building, and that's what we budget for that particular school's instructional supply budget. So not every district is this, or excuse me, not every school is the same, of course, because obviously enrollments are far different from school to school. Some line items we do keep the same, assignment notebooks and things like that. But in terms of overall classroom supplies, which the principals have a lot of discretion over and how that money is being used, and of course it gets approved over here at the district office, it is budgeted for $100 per student. So there is that money available to our staff for instructional supplies. In addition to district things like textbooks and things that the district would normally buy on a district-wide basis.
So I think we're very, very grateful for our PTSOs for helping us to raise money. But generally, they're raising money for the children or for field trips or that kind of thing. An example of the resources that are available, let's say you're the Illinois, for example, I think they have approximately 400 children, then that means $40,000 for the school to be used for various and sundry things, but there's also an equipment line that is available, additional money for libraries and computers, et cetera. So I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention because it's important not only that we have up-to-date textbooks, be they're online or hardback textbooks, but it's also important that when a teacher has an idea, that we're able to fund that idea because the funds have been previously allotted. So this is something that we've done every year. We just haven't commented publicly on that, but I did want to bring that to everyone's attention.
Thank you. Any further comments by members of the board with respect to the budget? Then I'll close this public hearing with respect to the proposed 2023-2024 budget and go back and call to order this meeting of the Board of 162 and ask the Secretary to recall the roll.
Mrs. Hutchinson,
Present.
Mr. Johnson,
Here.
Dr. Leatherwood,
Here.
Mrs. McCray, Mrs. Gordon, Mr. Bean.
Here. Okay, you've done communications, announcements, and schedules. The next item on the agenda is entitled Audience to Visitors pertaining to agenda items. If there's a member of the audience who would care to address the board with respect to an item on the agenda, they may do so at this time. Hearing none, I will then entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda. As is the policy, any board member can remove any item that's on the consent agenda and make it a debatable item. Is there any item on the consent agenda that a board member would like removed and made a debatable item? Hearing none, can I have a motion, please, to adopt the consent agenda?
Mr. President,
Yes.
move to approve the consent agenda dated September 19th, 2023, and every item contained therein.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the consent agenda be adopted. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Mr. President, if I could, each board member has a packet with our 2023-24 school improvement plans for each school. We did have a session for each of the schools to come in and to present the plans, and we went over goals and objectives. But we also looked at this a little differently this year. first of all, the social emotional aspect of it, and Mrs. Dusky does an excellent job of leading us forward with that. But the second thing that we looked at is something I call catch-up minutes. We know that we have things that either were not covered or were not learned as a result of COVID. And when you look at literature, you know that we need to pick up at least 200 minutes to compensate for that in order to spend on just English, language arts, and math. And so the issue that was presented to the principals, how will this be done? So as you read the school improvement plans, which by the way, each of the principals will post on their website so that parents may also see it. Now you have a condensed version. I actually have a notebook this size from every school that has the data for each child as well as analysis of the data. But we are looking at the catch-up, and we're slightly impatient, so we feel that we'll be able to do a lot of what we need to do this school year. There was a request for tutoring. All of the schools that have requested tutoring that will start on October 2nd, but we are using the staff that we have sometimes in unusual ways. I think that you're aware that all of our schools have technology teachers, we certainly have music teachers, art teachers, and on and on. But those teachers are trained in the same methodology and with the same strategies that teachers who are in the classroom teaching English language arts, math, social studies, science. Everyone has a forte, a specialty. So we're utilizing some of the time that we have during the day as catch-up time, and everyone has a cute way of calling what I call catch-up. One school calls it smile time, the other calls it doesn't matter, but it's the idea is to get one-on-one or small group tutoring to our children so that not only can we catch up, but so that there's an in-depth understanding of what it is that we're doing. But in addition to that, we have great faith in our evidence-based report cards, and our parents have been ever so supportive. And so there are videos that are going to be shared with the parents on how do you not only interpret the report card, how do you help? Because we believe firmly that our parents are anxious to help. I think about a year ago, we had a suggestion that we resume our parent university, and I did not know what would happen. We've had overwhelming success and attendance at our parent university, which means that people really are very anxious to learn. So there are packets going home to parents along with the report cards, and also a methodology that I think is just excellent. We're going to do a book study, and I thought I had my book with me, but we are going to all read the same book together. And at the kindergarten, first, second grade, you're looking at 37 teachers. And so we're going to be reading and doing a group talk. Part of that is going to occur on October 6th. So there are all kinds of creative ideas that I see as a result of the plans. But you do have the complete plans for, thank you. It's called Grading from the Inside Out. And this is our book study. If the board would like, I would certainly be happy to provide copies of the book if you would like to read along with us. But I think that there's nothing that stimulates discussion like the reading of the same materials, but perhaps from a different perspective, a different viewpoint. And so we're starting that whole process also. I could not be more excited about the 23-24 school year simply because of the ideas presented by the administrators, but also the excitement that the teachers feel at the younger grades in terms of a different way of looking at grading And we did watch a video this afternoon together, and it was interesting. Just to give you an example, if a child gets a 40 on a test, you may tell the child, you got to do better. I know you can do it. You have to have a progressive mindset. But the fact is that if you have a 40 on an exam, you probably are not going to be able to do much better than a D, maybe a C minus, because, you know, the grades are cumulative and it's the mean score. And so looking at this from a child's perspective, what is it that children are thinking about when they know that they're not going to be successful if you interpret success as a grade on a report card? And we know that our parents are monitoring their grades on the report card, even if they do their best, even if they get 100, and that was one of the examples given, 100 plus the 40, if you average them together, does not equal success in the mind of a child. So the standards-based report cards have created a lot of excitement throughout the district. But what has surprised me, I have not even received one email of a parent that feels that we should not go in that direction. So you'll see some of that reflected also. But I wanted to bring that to your attention, that you do have that. And if you would like, then I can certainly share with you my copies of the books that we have that have all of the grades and the analysis, and you can use that for your homework. But it's been an exciting 2 weeks as the schools have come in and made their presentations.
Thank you. And if any member, again, wants a copy of that book, please let the superintendent know.
I will let
Why don't I just order one for everyone?
Sounds good.
Mr. Johnson, you didn't have your, I will just assume that we're all going to read that together. And I've started reading mine, Grading from the Inside Out. I think it's going to be fascinating. But if you're here on October 6th and you're moving around the building, I think each room that you go to, there will be an idea or a concept that you will learn, even if you don't wear the title teacher. So that's my title, my suggestion. And Mr. President, I see that we're welcoming a new board member tonight, and she is not Mrs. Ware, someone that we don't know. I think she's been president of every PTSO that I've ever been to. She's certainly an active person and child-centered, but so that is my personal welcome. But I do feel that she will be an asset to the board. But please let me know your thoughts on the school improvement plans as you go through, and I will order you a book.
There's no further discussion on the motion. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bean,
Aye.
Mrs. Gordon, Mrs. McCray,
Aye.
Dr. Leatherwood,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mrs. Hutchinson.
Aye.
Okay. The next item on the agenda, as the superintendent has announced, is the appointment of Mrs. Ware to fill the vacancy created by the resignation of a former president.
There is a motion, even though it may not be shown. There is a motion, but it may not be shown, but we do have a motion.
We have a motion, but I do not see it.
I know we spoke with this earlier, and I was given the information to make the motion, but it was not printed in our packets.
Let's see if I have it.
I have the motion, Ron.
Just ask for it.
Okay, I'll ask for the motion then.
Thank you.
Okay.
Move to approve the resolution to fill the board vacancy.
Second.
It's been moved and second. And any discussion on the motion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Hutchinson,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Dr. Leatherwood,
Aye.
Mrs. McCray,
Aye.
Mrs. Gordon,
Aye.
Mr. Bean.
Aye. So, Mrs. Ware, You are hereby appointed, and you are now have to take the oath of office. And I will
Hello.
so I will read the oath of office. It's a long one, so take a deep breath.
Okay.
I, Rachel Ware,
Do solemnly swear or affirm I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of member of the Board of Education of Madison School District 162 in accordance with the Constitution of the State of Illinois.
Did you give her?
Constitution of the United States.
thank you.
Have you repeated after me?
The whole, yeah, just little segments though.
Yeah.
Okay.
She got the paper next.
Okay, I, Rachel Ware, do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of member of the Board of Education of Madison School District 162 in accordance with the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of Illinois, and the law of the State of Illinois to the best of my ability.
I further swear or affirm that
I further swear or affirm that I shall respect taxpayer interests by serving as a faithful protector of the school district's assets. I shall encourage and respect the free expression of opinion by my fellow board members and others who seek a hearing before the board while respecting the privacy of students and employees. I shall recognize that a board member has no legal authority as an individual and that decisions can be made only by a majority vote at a public board meeting. I shall abide by majority decisions of the board while retaining the right to seek changes in such decisions through ethical and constructive channels. As part of the Board of Education, I shall accept the responsibility for my role in the equitable and quality education of every student in the school district. I shall foster with the board extensive participation of the community, formulate goals, define outcomes, and set the course for Madison School District 162. I shall assist in establishing a structure and environment designed to ensure all students have the opportunity to attain their maximum potential through a sound organizational framework. I shall strive to ensure a contentious assessment of student achievement and all conditions affecting the education of our children in compliance with the state law. I shall serve as education's key advocate on behalf of students and our community schools to advance the vision of Madison School District 162. Yes, that's what I have.
One more.
One more.
Next page.
And I shall strive to work together with the district superintendent to lead the school district towards the fulfilling the vision of the board has created, fostering excellence for every student in the area of academic skills, knowledge, citizenship, and personal development. Thank you.
congratulations.
Welcome.
You have a board book in front of you, and you will now begin to start voting.
Page 6.
The next item on the agenda is the board will consider approval of the 2023-2024 fiscal year budget. May I have a motion, please?
Mr. President,
Yes.
move to approve the 2023-2024 fiscal year budget.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? I just want to say again, Craig, I appreciate the hard work that you put into putting this budget together. It's balanced. There's a surplus that is estimated, and it's all a reflection of your hard work in conjunction with the superintendent. And I just want to say on behalf of the board how much I appreciate what you do and how you do it. It's always been very thorough, very thoughtful, and very complete, and makes us look good. And I thank you on behalf of the board.
You're here. Thank you.
There's no further discussion. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bean,
Aye.
Mrs. Gordon,
Aye.
Mrs. McCray,
Aye.
Dr. Leatherwood,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mrs. Hutchinson,
Aye.
Mrs. Ware.
Aye.
It's your first vote. The board will consider approval of updated shared services agreement with Southland College Prep Charter High School. May I have a motion, please?
I think are we at B? Move to approve the updated shared services agreement with Southland College Prep Charter High School.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Mr. England, please.
The very back end of your packet is a copy of the shared services agreement that was entered into between Southland and District 162, actually 2 years ago. And there's not a change to the actual agreement itself. However, the agreement does reference an Appendix A, or excuse me, Exhibit A, that gets updated every year. And Exhibit A really outlines all of the various areas for which services are to be shared and what those allocations are for those various areas. And then as you see off to the right-hand side of that chart, you will see how, what the rationale is for, how certain percentages are derived. And mostly that's based on, time in terms of staffing, or it may be based on square footage if we're talking about custodial costs, things like that. So not much change from last year. One thing I note is last year at this time, when the board was approving Exhibit A, there was no director of security. And so now there is. That position has been added on here. And there are a handful of folks where the percentages have changed just to better reflect, how their time is being spent.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on the motion?
A question.
Yes.
If a need arises like mid-year, let's say, can these percentages be changed or renegotiated?
Absolutely. The agreement itself actually calls for that. And so the way it works is on a monthly basis, the business manager from 162 and the business manager from Southland meet and discuss anything that may have changed or maybe something new that may have come up, meet with me and with Dr. Davis, and then we take a look at that to see that we concur. And then so changes, there is flexibility within the agreement to make those changes as things develop. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
If there are no further questions, roll call, please.
Mr. Bean,
Aye.
Mrs. Gordon,
Aye.
Mrs. McCray,
Aye.
Dr. Leatherwood,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mrs. Hutchinson,
Aye.
Mrs. Ware.
Aye.
The motion has been adopted. I apologize. I've had 3 other meetings today, and I'm not focusing correctly. In the prior motion to approve the 2023-2024 budget, I was to ask, and it's right here in bold red, I should have seen it. I asked if there's any member of the audience who wish to comment on the ARP ESSER spending plan. Then have the minutes reflect that I did request members of the public, but there were no responses. Thank you. The next item on the agenda,
Didn't make the motion.
a motion on that.
No, we did not. Yep, did.
Sorry. Okay, can I have a motion then to approve the 2023-2024 ARP ESSER spending plan?
Mr. President,
Yes.
move to approve the 2023-2024 ARP ESSER spending plan.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Ware,
Aye.
Mrs. Hutchinson,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Dr. Leatherwood,
Aye.
Mrs. McCray,
Aye.
Mrs. Gordon,
Aye.
Mr. Bean.
Aye. Thank you. The next item on the agenda, board will consider the purchase and installation of 44 smart flat board panels from COTG. And the lowest quote received in the amount of $160,565.81.
Mr. President.
May I have a motion, please?
Yes, Mr. President. Move to approve the purchase and installation of 44 smart flat panel from COTG, the lowest quote received in the amount of $160,565.81.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Mr. President, if I could, Mr. Evans, if you would, it's, I remember approving a motion in the spring, I want to say for 125 smart boards. And now we're doing what, if you would comment on that? I think that you've been in every building, every classroom, and we will have happy teachers. Please, sir.
Good evening, Board.
Good evening.
So Dr. Davis mentioned earlier that we did purchase 125 boards earlier, I think last year, I believe it was. And what we did was we targeted those classrooms that had boards that were malfunctioning. So that was the immediate need. The second phase of this was the remaining teachers' boards that were either had old technology, which were projector-based, meaning they still had lamps. And we circle back in phase two and get everyone an up-to-date smart board that consists of just a flat panel LCD screen that's approximately 75 inches. And all the teachers are going to be ecstatic. In fact, in phase one, they were asking, the teachers that didn't get their boards in phase one were asking, when is phase two happening? So this is the completion of that project. So we went around and inventoried every building. I spoke with the principals and asked them who was remaining and left. I visited several schools, as Dr. Davis mentioned, and we came up with 44 additional boards that we needed. So we would be replacing all of the projector-based LCD or projector-based smart boards in the schools with just regular LCD smart panels.
Mr. Evans, what is our timeline for installation, please?
So the timeline is once the board approves tonight, I will make the order effective. The lead time is approximately 2 weeks. So we should have them within 2 weeks, and then I will schedule with the installers and arrange with the buildings to get the installers out. I did speak to vendors, and they told me the installers are not busy right now. So I'm thinking probably within the next 3 to 4 weeks, we should have everything done and completed.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Mr. Evans, thank
Yes,
you.
sir.
COTG then is just going to deliver them to our facilities or deliver them to our main receiving. Are they also doing installation as part of this expenditure?
Yes, sir. So installation is included. So they will deinstall the existing boards, and then they will install the new boards as well. So each board will be delivered. They're broken down by schools. So the quantity that each school is allocated will be delivered to that particular school, and then it will be installed.
Thank you. So just building off of that, so it's delivery, installation, and removal and disposal?
Removal, I'm not sure about disposal. They may take down, and then typically what I will do is come in and have a recycling company, then pick up the old and recycle that.
Thank you. Yeah, that was part of my question. And lastly, it sounds like we've already had 100, I missed the number, 125 have already been installed and were used in the last academic school year.
Yes, sir. So
the additional 44 that are going in, the amount of maybe onboarding, training that might be necessary for those 44 teachers to be able to fully utilize them? Is there any?
Yes, sir. So we had professional development from actually the vendor Smart. That professional development was recorded as well. So it allows me to also send out that training that they did via recording to all the staff. So it continues whenever we have professional development and I put out new technology, we always offer those services to
Very good.
staff.
Is that an example of one of?
That is an example of one of them. However, that is an older board. The newer board, I'm not sure that that's quite 75 inches, but the newer boards have a little bit more functionality and features, but that is exactly what it will look like.
Very good. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for your questions. Are there any further questions on the motion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Bean,
Aye.
Mrs. Gordon,
Aye.
Mrs. McCray,
Aye.
Dr. Leatherwood,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mrs. Hutchinson,
Aye.
Mrs. Ware.
Aye.
Board will consider a motion to purchase from Media Center Furniture for Arcadia and Indiana schools from Lowry McDonald Company through the National Cooperative Purchasing Alliance in the amount of $248,010.40. May I have a motion, please?
Yes, Mr. President,
Yes.
move to approve the purchase of Media Center furniture for Arcadia and Indiana schools from Lowry McDonald Company through the National Cooperative Purchasing Alliance in the amount of $248,010.40.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Yes, Mr. President, the board was kind enough last year to enable us to replace the furniture at the Madison. I don't know, Mr. Lice, if we have a picture of that, but I think it's beautiful, and Mrs. Houston was kind enough to walk me through and to show me the nuances of her new library. Now we move on to the Arcadia and the Indiana. However, every school is different, and the consultant did go to each of these schools, met with the administration as well as the teachers, and so each school was able to reflect their intent and the way that they wanted this to look. In general, libraries generally have a particular look, and when you go in one library, you've really seen them all. What we wanted to do was to create a place where children would want to go in and to sit and to read. We also installed smart boards in the libraries that we've done. Just to take you back a few years, you'll remember when we built the new addition and the library onto the Illinois. It really changed the way that it looks, but it also changed the way that the library is utilized. So we're moving in that same direction with the Arcadia and the Indiana. Perhaps it might be a Christmas present. We don't want to presume, but this is all custom-made furniture, and I love the look. I still, even though everything is technology, and I've got my iPad and my Kindle, children sitting with books and reading, or having a librarian to do a book study, and I just think that's a wonderful thing. And so that's the concept, and we're hoping that we can give a Christmas present when the furniture is made, if the board approves.
It's nothing like the smell of a new book, is it, Dr. Davis?
Pardon me?
It's nothing like the smell of a new book.
That's true.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Bean,
Aye.
Mrs. Gordon,
Aye.
Mrs. McCray,
Aye.
Dr. Leatherwood,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mrs. Hutchinson,
Aye.
Mrs. Ware.
Aye.
Mr. President, if I could, I want to apologize for any mistakes on the agenda. Our precious attorney is out, and I do see that generally I come next, but the report of the superintendent is not on the agenda, and I take full responsibility for that. So if I may be permitted when it's time for me, then
Mr.
I would
President.
love that.
I'd like to amend the agenda to add 8.1. to include the superintendent's report.
Second.
Moved and seconded that the agenda be amended to include the superintendent's report. On the motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Your report, Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you. I want to begin by sharing our enrollment for this school year, and it's a little different than we have been in the past. Starting with the Arcadia, the largest school in the district for the first time is the Arcadia, 526 students and counting. That's where we are. The second largest school in the district really is the Illinois, and that's never happened before, followed by the Huth and so forth. But we're very close to our projections. We project for by the time that we close, because we always pick up students as we journey throughout the school year, but a sizable number come in January, and they will probably in January 2024. But our projection was 2,440, and our opening number is 2,369. So that's where we are. But the shift is towards the younger children, and I think I mentioned that at another meeting. We did have 326 new children to come in, families moving into our district, and most of them were younger children. To bring to the board's attention, the numbers of kindergartners this year has doubled. My interpretation of that is that during the pandemic, parents decided to keep the very, very small ones at home, but now we see that they're coming in, and so we have an increase at the kindergarten and at the first grade. So the good news is the stability of the district, that our projections, we're very close, but there is a shift, and it did require the reassignment of a few teachers to the lower grades, simply because we no longer have large numbers at the Huth. For those of you who've been with the board for some time, you know that one time we housed 900 students at the Huth, and then we decided to reorganize. And when we reorganized, the Indiana and the Sauk became 4, 5, and 6, because the Huth was that large simply because it housed the 6th grade. But a usual year would be 600 to 625 at the Huth, and we see now that that's 388. However, when you're looking at the Arcadia, the Madison is larger, but these are small children coming in, and I think it bodes well for us as a district that students come in and they remain and until they graduate. And so we've had very little movement. We did not have that many transfers out, but that's where we are now. And I don't know if there are questions, but this is very close to our projection.
Mr. President. Yes. Question for the superintendent. So with Huth at 388 and immediately following our renovations,
I'm sorry, sir.
and Huth had significant renovations over the summer?
Yes, they did. The second phase of the renovations are next summer.
Very good. Is there any, are there any interactions perhaps between the phases of the work that we're doing for improvements and what was significantly smaller student body size in the school? Would we be able to, take advantage of that by having the small number of students in the newly renovated better areas, or is there going to be any interplay between the fact that the building's fully renovated and presumably fully renovated for the 600 some size of
It will be
students?
at the conclusion of next summer. This summer was primarily devoted to washrooms, and I think I showed you the pictures, and as we began to dig down, we found the original plumbing, which was interesting, but it had to come out. And to be quite frank, we barely made the opening day with all the work that had to be done. But the Huth now has washrooms that are touchless washrooms in terms of cleanliness. That is what we've been putting in the other schools. And we did some work in the ceiling of the large gym. But the next phase, which will be huge, will be removing that carpeting and others, things that it would not be possible to have children in the building. The other thing that we did this year is every door we replaced at Huth, and our carpenters were there. But it's going to take us most of next summer. Hopefully, we can do lockers because that's huge and that's a different set of people who put in lockers. But definitely, we will be able to do the carpeting and the tile. But there was no time. The day before we were destined to open, we received a permit from the State Board of Education to allow us to house the children. I think it's very interesting that as adults, the teachers were there and no one has anything to say about us being there. But the rules are different when we house children. But that would be our next largest project. If you think of the Huth, remember many of you probably have not been to the upstairs of the Huth. It's fairly new. It's the newest edition, and the Commons is new. But there's a section inside of the Huth that actually goes back to the 1800s. It was the idea of previous boards that they wanted to maintain some sense of history. And in that little section of the Huth, which is in the center, you see a picture in the back of what the Huth looked like in the beginning. And there's still some bricks and other things that are there, and it houses old minutes of the board. So it's a piece of history, and we try to keep that. But it is time that we do a renovation, and we're hopeful if we don't run out of time that we can do the lunchroom, et cetera. But it's going to take us 2 summers, and we can't just shift because the band room, the music room, the art room are in a whole different section of the building than the academic room. So it would be difficult for us to do that.
Thank you.
Other questions on enrollment before I go on? Mrs. Gordon, you're looking, no?
I was just thinking about a new gym for the Huth. When you're talking about renovations, I think they need a new gym.
Well, we probably, since it's in the center of the building, have to tear down the buildings. But I'm not an architect, but that's probably what we would have to do. Actually, because 162 owns the land and other areas throughout the district, at one time, we had a proposition on the table, and we thought that by this time, had it not been for COVID, we would be at 4,000 students. We planned on building on the land that we own that's behind Richmond Square, and we were going to build an addition onto the Illinois and double its size. So we purchased land there also, and that's been years. We have not had a new housing project in many years. Craig, I don't even remember, but at one time, that was commonplace, that the villages would come to us and indicate that they were building and the projection for the new students coming in. But we really thought in 2008, that's when all of this occurred, that we were going to be looking at 4,000 students. And we're not, we're stable. We're not losing children, but we have no use for the additional room. But I have to think, I would really ask the architects about that, because whoever built the Huth, and of course of years and years ago, built the gyms in the center of the building. So I really can't answer, but I do know what we're going to attempt to do next year. So other questions about enrollment or just open houses? I mentioned that, and we're doing a lot with social media. That's our Kennedy, and so we do have a few pictures of children. Each open house was different. I do want to thank the Park Forest Police. When I went to Mrs. Hatsana, where are you? Mrs. King, I see you. When I went to the Indiana for their open house, all of a sudden, I don't know, 7 or 8 police officers along with the chief came in, and we were doing a joint session. Everyone became quiet, and so there was absolutely nothing wrong. There's a new police chief with a different concept, and what he wanted everyone to do was simply to introduce his men and to make them comfortable and let them know that he would be visiting, as we have requested, our schools. But that many police coming in, everyone was taken back a bit, but it was a wonderful thing. And then they were called, they had a call naturally, but he did leave two of his police officers there with us for open house. I thought it was just a wonderful thing that we experienced. But transportation. We have a meeting tomorrow with our new company, Safeway, and they've kept their word. They've kept their word. There's never been a day when there was not a bus available. There was never a day when a bus driver called in sick and that there was not a replacement. I think you know that I mentioned to you that they're leasing property on 217th and Central. We see those buses there, and they've also opened offices there, but they're consistent, they are reliable. They're not necessarily as flexible as we would like, but they've learned about us. What they thought is that on the first day of school, that there wouldn't be any other children coming in, and so therefore there'd be no need to change that. That's not true. We are still accepting students in, and when they come in, sometimes it necessitates that we change routes. But the most exciting thing for the schools is we can now take field trips, and most of the schools have requested field trips. It's important. We just came from an event called the Classic, and most of the of U.S. board members were there, and we took children. But what they shared with me is most of them had never been in Soldiers Field. But my question would be, since COVID, have they been to the Museum of Science and Industry? Have they been to the Field Museum? Have they been to the Art Institute? The answer is probably no, because that's what we do. And so as soon as we announced that field trips were available, principals have been sending their requests, and we're extremely happy about that. But those buses exist, and the other thing that parents have commented to me about is the newness of the buses. They're beautiful, and I like to think that, as I told one set of parents, it's no more than we deserve. And so my only comment about Safeway is that they've kept their word and we're moving forward. Secondly, on October 2nd, we'll begin after-school tutoring, after-school clubs, etc. The Huth already has begun because they house our sports, but the other schools, upon request, and we do have requests from the Salk in Indiana, they will be opening up on October 2nd and beginning their after-school programs. That's something also that we were unable to do, so I'm extremely happy about that. But what are we doing with our annex? We have, it's been interesting. I did not think this was going to be such a complex project, but it has been. But we're on the verge. We're on the verge. You know, we had an earlier opening date. Then we had a second opening date, but all of a sudden we have such cooperation from ComEd and from NICOR. I would say we're 5 to 7 days out, and I will let you know, but we're 5 to 7 days out. All of the cooking equipment is there. Today, NICOR, as well as the companies that install the equipment, began to test the equipment out, and so there is staff there preparing to cook, and so we're looking forward to that. But in addition to that, you will see two things that are interesting. You see all of the, I guess you would say, clothes hangers or whatever, but we have storage space, And as you know, we own God knows how many costumes. You've been to our Christmas programs. Now we have a place to store them, and so that will be wonderful. They can be stored hanging up. But you see another empty space there. There is room for us to have our retreat. There's room for us to give small dinners for staff, for the children, and for parents. And you would be, and the catering facility would be able to simply prepare the food. So our concept is we're not giving money to anyone else. But may I answer questions if there are any about the annex as we're on the verge? We certainly, absolutely will open before our next board meeting. Okay. And finally, I'm sorry, did someone say
I have one
something?
question.
Yes, ma'am.
Have we already hired those staff members that are going to work at the annex or in the kitchen?
Yes. Now, we have our own staff members, and we did not, each school has their own, we call them a cooks, but they really were not actually cooking food, and lunchroom supervisors. Those remain in our buildings. But Quest, and I believe in the spring, we brought that to the board's attention and approval. So they are there, they're anxiously waiting well, that's my interpretation of it. I think that they're anxiously waiting. They have smiles on their faces anyway. So they're there and they're prepared. But remember, we opened on August 21st. They have been feeding all of the children from their other sites all of that time. And so then this becomes the site. Something I thought was very interesting in that we will not have to warm any food up. There are portable, matter of fact, we have 29 of them, ovens that the food is put in. They're electrical. They're plugged into the electrical sockets now. The transport trucks are also have an electrical source, and so they're plugged in, and then they're simply wheeled in and plugged into our kitchens. So there's never a time that we would be heating food or anything of that sort. And so our concept was that we wanted children to have fresh food, not frozen food. And it certainly looks that we're going to be able to do that. But they're there, and they're called Quest. Probably the closest school that I know of that has them is Homewood Flossmoor. They've had Quest for years, and we look forward to that. But something else that we will talk more about in the future, and that is, you know, that it is our wish that we solicit other districts because the facility is able to produce 10,000 meals per shift. And should this happen, then we will be coming, well, first of all, it will happen because there are conversations being had now. Then there would be other districts that they would be cooking for and delivering. This would offset our price and expenditures, but we must open. We must open before we solicit business. But I do anticipate January, February coming back to the board, perhaps with a memorandum of understanding from other districts as we seek to assist them by providing food for them also, but also lowering the price that we would have to pay and possibly the price that they would have to pay also. But we need to open. We need to open.
President? Do we have a strategic plan for letting our community members know that this new development has occurred?
I don't think we have a strategic plan, but you think there are people that don't know?
Well, you know, I mean, it's a beautiful, you know, I know people saying it's being renovated, and I know that there's a long history with the skating rink. But I just wonder if there's a way to, if we think it's, you know, we may not even think it's important, but if there is some value in letting the community at large know that, you know, this has happened.
Well, I will work on that, but on October 19th, we have 37 superintendents who are coming from the South Suburban area, and they're all going to have breakfast together over there. I think that you know where we're going with this idea. And so that's our first entree, but then I will certainly think of other opportunities as we move forward. Quest is very easy to work with. They're embracing the community, and really, it's such a huge place that we're not in the kitchen, we're not in their way, but there is a head chef and others, and so I'm not personally cooking the food. So, October 20th, please put that on your calendar. I will certainly remind you. 2 years ago, we started something and we had no idea that it was going to get it to be as popular as it is. We have always gone to the pumpkin patch, and we would get on buses and we would go there and we would give them our money and we would spend a few hours at the pumpkin patch. But 2 years ago, and at that time it was because of COVID, we decided to purchase almost 3,000 pumpkins, hay, scarecrows, etc. We created our own experience with the children, but it turned out to be more of a learning experience than we could ever have going anywhere place else. So we ask our parents that might be listening, others here. I know that Dr. Mays has some secret plans that are going on, as well as Mrs. McGuire with the 3 and 4-year-olds. It's become a tradition that we do that, but we do ask you if you would like to come and participate, and we are even willing to give you a pumpkin to take home. So that concludes my report, Mr. President. If there are any questions about anything at all, I stand ready to answer.
Questions for the superintendent?
Mr. President, I had a comment about the transportation Safeway. First of all, thank you for sharing the update. Like, it's an exciting update to know that they're doing so well. I have a student at the Huth who took the activity bus for the first day, and I didn't know where she was going to be dropped off. And so I called Safeway to ask, could I be told, where my student was going to be dropped off? And so after a moment of pause, they came back and said, I can't let you know because of privacy, to protect the student's privacy, so you should call the district. And though that didn't help me with my purposes, I was pleased and impressed that they did that. That they were very thorough. They thought about it, just that this was the policy that they had in place. So I'm really pleased. I have 3 students that are taking the bus, and they've never been late. Nobody's ever had to wait a long time. They're courteous. I've just been very impressed with it.
I think they're well trained, and I've been pleased. Thank you.
Further? The next item on the agenda is old business. Is there any old business?
No, sir.
Board members' issues and reports?
Mr. President,
Yes.
I just want to ask, I think if memory serves me correctly, I didn't check when I was coming today, but I took a look over at the Salk, and I think that fence came down, the baseball cage, I think that's what it was. And I just want to check, make sure I wasn't, I'm not off, but did that happen?
We have hammers, and we have all kinds of ways of getting things down. And I found out if you go and stand in the field and you have a sledgehammer, someone is going to come, and they were right there with me. It's a wonderful thing. Thank you, Dr. Morgan, for inviting me over with the sledgehammer. And so immediately, someone took the sledgehammer out of my hand because I was sick of looking at it, and it is down.
I thought that was.
But I didn't, I can't take credit for it. I just was,
Well, I just want to say, that is fantastic. That's just really fantastic. And even looking over there, I drove by the other day, and I was just like, oh, right. I was like, it's gone. And then the field just looks so beautiful. Just all that green, it just stretches behind that black fence, and it's uninterrupted. But the fact that that kind of initiative was taken, it's for something so, especially given the context of running a district, that may seem so small. I'm very grateful. So yeah, it looks great, and I just want to extend my gratitude for the work that's happening here to make sure that not only are our students getting the best education possible, but that we'll show how we're showing ourselves to the public and a forward-facing presence. That we're really conscientious about that too.
I have a comment, please, Mr. President. I wanted to go back with our open houses, and we had a wonderful experience. I would like to compliment Principal Usama on her different take. We actually had a small entertainment. We had a show. We had a solo by a saxophonist. We had singing. And it was really, really nice. And the open house. Parents were there and enjoyed watching their students. I was surprised, and it was very well put together. We had the opportunity to have it twice. And it was just as good the second time as it was the first. So that was very nice. I was very impressed with the Richardson Square and the secluded playground. It is perfect for that aged student. The way it's constructed and its location, it was very good. I really, really liked seeing that. And with Huth, it was really nice. I did see the bathrooms. I made my first trip to look. And the inclusion of the self-fill water bottle spigot. I wasn't expecting that. I said, oh, look at that. Very nice, age appropriate. And then I'm going back and forth. I've got let's fill your water bottle up. Go back to class and be still. Maybe not be still. But not as much need for as much hydration and a lot of extra bottles. I thought that was very nice to have that included. Very nice. And overall, there's nothing like seeing the small babies, come mommy, 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 here to show you, I want to show you. And they're in their centers cooking invisible food and enjoying being a small person in school. So it was very heartwarming to be able to make 3 or 4 of the schools. So looking forward to the other schools, and thank you, teachers. I know it's not easy, but it's well worth it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think one more thing, Mr. President, and given the context of the Classic, we talked about partnership today. The fact that the young people from 162 were able to see reflected in their big brothers and sisters, I say, such excellence. I still think we were robbed, but but the fact that they can sit and just see just excellence on display. And excellence within that space, because it's not just, it's one thing to see it in an isolated sense, where it's just like, okay, this is all there is. But to be exposed and to see all these different schools and to see that that Southland stands so tall, has such big shoulders. I mean, I just think it's amazing. And to think of that as a potential opportunity for them, going past the 8th grade. But that exposure is just, I think, invaluable. So as we think about the young people, when the older kids and how that interaction is engaged in activities like the Classic, I'm just really excited for what is happening for them experientially, and what that means for how they can dream a bit bigger about their futures. So thank you so much, also, for that opportunity for the young ones to spend time with the big kids and to see excellence on display.
And a thank you to all the parents that went. We
Yes.
had a ton of them, and we were actually there 10 hours. So, but it's just a wonderful day because I see the smiles on their faces. But also, sometimes Chicago gets negative publicity. We were totally safe. The policemen did an excellent job. The organization structure was magnificent. And so just a pat on the back for everyone that had something to do with it. I thought it was just beautiful in every way.
Thank you. I would ask, with that many children going down, did we lose anyone? The next item on the agenda is audience to visitors. This is a time when a member of the audience can address us on any subject whatsoever. Is there any member of the audience who care to address the board? Seeing none, hearing none. The executive session is listed. Is that necessary?
No, sir, that's a mistake.
And I will entertain a motion to adjourn.